Captured by the terrible decaying god of corruption, the Clothier was subjected to torturous servitude for longer than anyone could possibly endure, and yet his master would not allow him to die, granting him inhuman longevity to continue finding unsuspecting souls that the cosmic horror may consume. It was not just his service that the terrible deity desired though. The crawling chaos knew its time was short on this earth and searched for an alternate fate, finding one closer than he expected. Over the countless centuries of his enslavement, the old man was unknowingly granted a degree of the Elder God's power and slowly became much more than a mere human. Gods had begun. Humanity had all players deep and challenging, different is less likely to get me horribly Cursed and alone, guarding the entrance of the dungeon and capturing victims for his master, the old man was once an esteemed clothier of a village long since decayed to dust. In the early days of the chaotic god's fall to Terraria, few were yet aware of any danger and continued life as they always had. Yet the creeping corruption grew ever nearer each day, snatching up unsuspecting prey. While out searching for dye materials, the Clothier strayed too far from his village, encountering the fearsome plague firsthand. Along with many others who was brought before the creature from the stars. Some were taken as nourishment for the Elder God and his hordes of foul beings. Others were mutilated and transformed into those very creatures, and the remaining were put to work on various tasks about the corrupt domain. As the subjects grew weak, they were taken away to be offered to the god, and were replaced with more captured Terrarians. But the Clothier held fast, each fallen colleague driving him to stay strong so that he would not meet their same fate. For years he toiled at the Elder God's various projects, as the corruption consumed the entire world, praying that a swift and painless death may be granted to him, but still he persisted. Decades continued to creep by, the Clothier's body having grown leathery and sinuous from all of his work, but still he was strong. Eventually he realized the years had become centuries, millennia even, and he began to fear that he could not die at all. That the great lord had granted some level of immortality to his subjects, especially now that there were few new recruits, the civilizations of man having been razed to the ground, and the survivors hiding for their lives. In time though, the corrupt god grew sickly, his command over his vast dominion slowly slipping. He commanded the remnants of his subjects to construct a great temple into the ground, imbued with his own cosmic power so that he may summon his brethren. The Clothier, now an old man, was picked out though. He would not work on the temple, for the Chaos God had noticed his fortitude and desired him for a much more important task. The old man was bestowed with great power from the deepest reaches of space, his body blazing with a cosmic energy, and he was tasked with guarding the entrance of the temple until the god's people came for him. The wait would be lengthy however, and the old deity's body grew so frail that it literally tore itself apart, leaving naught but a pile of bones. And yet the spirit of corruption lived on, compelling the old man to kidnap people from the new villages springing up across Terraria, returning them to the temple, quickly becoming a decrepit dungeon so that his master may feed on them. In this time, dwelling alone in the dungeon, physically forbade from leaving, the old man created works of art that he would adorn the stony walls with. He crafted furnitures and fixtures. He even taught himself the ways of alchemy and the mystic arts, in the pursuit of eldritch knowledge he felt bottled up inside him. Over the centuries of his imprisonment, he wrote vast tomes of incomparable insight, spells only known to the gods, and at last he came upon the truth he had been searching for. The great Elder God had never actually died. The abilities it had granted him not simple power, but a portion of its soul, a fragment that would consume the old man's body and reanimate its titanic skeleton when the dungeon was threatened, only to reconstitute him afterwards, none the wiser. It was at that moment he realized the danger he posed to the world, that at any time the god inside him could emerge and destroy all. It was him all along who was consuming the kidnapped victims, the cosmic terror blinding him to the truth previously. Using the knowledge that he had unlocked, he devised a way to bind his essence into an effigy of himself, a technique he would later teach to the hero of Terraria in order to defeat another cosmic deity. With this, he hoped he could separate the two souls within him and finally end the chaotic terror. Rather, all that it did was consume the old man's body, unleashing the skeleton menace. No, someone else would need to break the curse by destroying the old god once and for all. For the longest time, the old man would wait at the mouth of the dungeon, judging travellers and heroes unfit to fight his master, until one champion came and finally did what no one else could. The old man believed he would at long last be able to rest, but then something happened he could never have expected. He was once again reborn, not as the frail old man he had been, but healthy and free. He would go with the champion, return to his old profession, but the powers he had possessed for so long remained. Unbeknown to him, the creatures that had risen in the dungeon had found a way to create more of his effigy, each possessing a sliver of the Chaos God's soul. The Clothier was free of the dungeon, but his curse had not been fully broken, and if one of those effigies was destroyed, then the Clothier's life would be sapped away, and Skeletron would rise again. The Clothier would soon come to learn that he would never be able to die, not so long as an effigy existed, and he would be born again upon Skeletron's defeat, perpetuating the cycle evermore. All the Clothier ever wanted was to return to his loom, and yet even to this day he guards a great and terrible secret bound to his own life. A duality of essence, a monster dwelling within his soul. But then, if he were ever to somehow tame that monster, well, then he would become most powerful indeed.